Hello, this is Travis Bell.
This is Robbie Henderson.
Thanks for joining us today. And we're going to talk about how to negotiate repairs after a home inspection, which is very important.
Never comes up.
Never comes up, right?
Never comes up.
All the time. So after we go under contract, right, what's the first contingency that we have in a contract? The first phase, what's the number one thing after they've applied for the loan?
You typically have 10 to 15 days to get the house inspected. You can have any type of inspection that's being done. And it's kind of the buyer's first look at the house and you're looking under the covers. You're making sure that everything is what you thought it was.
Right. So hire a professional home inspector, potentially a professional termite/WDO inspector, structural, roofing, whatever that is during that period of time, right?
Exactly.
So after that's done, you collect all the information, then what happens?
And then, what typically happens is the buyer just accepts it and then we move on to closing.
Okay, so beyond the sarcasm, what really happens? So this is our due diligence, right?
Right.
Our due diligence period to say whether it's an as-is contract or a repair contract, the buyer needs to know what they're getting themselves into, right?
Exactly.
And are there ever hot buttons that come up during that inspection?
There are. So one of the things that we've discovered is the insurance companies have passed a lot of things on to the future buyer that the seller is not necessarily required to fix.
Okay.
So you've got electrical issues, you've got roofing issues, you've got a lot of things that have plumbing. You got a lot of things that, the 4-point inspection for your, the inspector will go out there and then they'll do a 4-point inspection for your insurance company. And they're going to say, hey, this roof is too old. This roof doesn't have the proper clipping. This plumbing is not done correctly. And it's kind of funny because the seller doesn't necessarily have to do that as the homeowner. However, when they go to sell the property, these are issues that we see often.
So basically, they have to do those things in order for the buyer to purchase the home.
Exactly.
Correct. Okay. So the number one thing is when we start this discussion is the buyer needs to know what kind of contract they currently have in place, right? Is it a contract that actually has repairs built into it? Or is it an as-is contract, right?
Right.
And so we need to go back to every time to say, what kind of contract do we have? What kind of latitude do we have to ask for repairs?
And I would just tell you that the majority of the time, what we find ourselves is what we try and do is educate our buyers and our sellers by reading the contract with them prior to going under contract. So they have clarity on what to expect when they do find that right house or when they sell their house. I also find that maybe not every agent is doing that, because sometimes we get into issues where you're dealing with a seller or a buyer on the other side that doesn't necessarily understand their responsibilities.
So, and that's all the letter of the contract, right? But the reality of the situation is that oftentimes you need to go outside of the contract, right? Mm-hmm. Because what if it is an as-is contract, but yet the roof is failing, the seller didn't know it, but they need to fix it, right?
Exactly.
When we meet with sellers on the flip side, we often say, we know you're going to repair all the things you know about. It's usually the things that you don't know about that you might have to repair, right? So I'm not going to crawl underneath my house or in my attic, right? There might be something going on up there.
Yeah.
The inspector will do that and then let us know, right?
Exactly.
So, it's, again, we know what kind of contract it is, but sometimes we've got to say, okay, let's take a break. Let's look at reality. Seller still wants to sell it. Buyer still wants to buy it. So it might be slightly outside of that contract. And that's a conversation.
Exactly. And I would just tell people on both sides, let's look at the hot buttons. Let's pay attention to what are the things that are going to get the transaction to move forward to a closing. So if you're the buyer and it's something cosmetic, just, let it go.
So what you're saying is pick your battles.
Pick your battles.
Yeah. And that's fair, right? Because those are the big things.
I agree.
Yeah, those are important. So we've covered what kind of contract it is, pick your battles, insurance related issues. So let's just say we come up with a list and buyers and sellers agree to it, right? Say, okay, these things need to be done. How do you go about doing them? Does a seller do the repairs or do they give a credit for the buyers to do the repair after they purchase the house?
Well, and that's a great question. And it depends. And it honestly, the beauty of the buyer getting a credit is the fact that they know it's getting done by their people and they know it's getting done right. If not, what we're relying on is re-inspections or receipts. And, so that's kind of the thing. And, there's so many balls in the air when you're moving in this, it's a time period and all that type of stuff. So we want to, move things forward. And I would tell you something like on a roof, you're not going to get a roofer out there in a contractual period of time to replace a roof. So those are things that will definitely happen after the closing.
Potentially, right? You got to balance that with the insurance, right? Okay, cool. Well, those are your tips on how to negotiate repairs after a home inspection. There are many more ways to do it. It's very important to hire a professional realtor that can walk you through the contracts and introduce you to the right home inspectors, as well as the right professionals to actually fix the issues. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
So do you know any professionals?
We do. How about the Bell Henderson team? So click below, subscribe to us, and we'd love to help you buy or sell a home.
Thank you for visiting us today.